The Valari Empire was old. Very old. They had ruled 12 star systems for more than 10,000 years. Their people were tall and covered in blue scales. Their eyes were golden and full of pride. They believed they were the greatest civilization in the galaxy. No one could match their power. No one could challenge their might. Their warfleet was their greatest treasure. 5,000 warships floated in the darkness of space. Each ship was massive and beautiful. Each ship carried weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. The Valari had bought these ships long ago, and they had used them to build their empire. Every species in the sector feared the Valari Warfleet. High Commander Torek was the leader of this great fleet. He was 7 feet tall, with dark blue scales and scars across his face from many battles. He had served the Empire for 200 years. He had never lost a war. He had never known fear. Today, he stood before the Valari Council in their great hall. The hall was made of black stone and golden lights. 12 council members sat on high thrones, looking down at him. Torek's face was twisted with anger as he showed them images on a large screen. "Look at this," he said, his voice deep and harsh. "Human colony ships. They are entering the neutral zone. They are building settlements on planets that belong to no one. Today, it is the neutral zone. Tomorrow, it will be our territory." The council members whispered among themselves. Humans were a young species. They had only been traveling among the stars for 300 years. They were small and soft, with no scales or claws. They seemed weak. They seemed harmless. But they were spreading fast. Very fast. "What do you suggest, High Commander?" asked the eldest council member, her voice thin and cold. Torek smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "War. We strike now. While they are still weak, we destroy their colonies. We burn their homeworld. We end the human threat before it begins." The vote was quick. The decision was unanimous. The Valari Empire would go to war against humanity. Far away, in the Sol system, Earth floated peacefully in the darkness. The blue planet was home to 12 billion humans. Around it, space stations and orbital platforms filled the sky like silver stars. Ships came and went, carrying goods and people to colonies across human space. On the largest orbital station, a man named Park Do-yoon sat in his office. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore the uniform of an admiral in the Earth Defense Force. Behind him, a large window showed the curve of Earth below. His second-in-command, Captain Kang Yuna, walked into his office. She was young, only 35, with short black hair and sharp eyes. She carried a datapad in her hands, and her face was pale. "Sir," she said, "we just received a message from the Valari Empire." Do-yoon looked up from his desk. "What kind of message?" "A declaration of war, sir. They are sending their entire fleet, 5,000 warships. They will arrive at our borders in 3 weeks." Do-yoon was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. Yuna was confused. They were facing the largest warfleet in the galaxy. They had less than 200 ships. This was not a time for smiling. "Sir, did you hear what I said?" "I heard you, Captain." Do-yoon stood up and walked to his window. He looked down at Earth, at the planet his family had called home for generations. "Tell me, Yuna, what do you know about the Hanul shipyard?" Yuna thought for a moment. Hanul Shipyard? It was a company on Mars. They built ships about 60 years ago. They closed down a long time ago. Why? OPT. OPT. Mars reading LAR. With PT. Why? Pull up their old records, the classified ones. Authorization code. Do-yoon 7 Alpha. Yuna typed the code into her datapad. The screen flickered. Files appeared that she had never seen before. Old files. Secret files. She opened them and began to read. The color drained from her face. Sir, this cannot be right. Keep reading. Yuna scrolled through the files. Blueprints, contracts, shipping records, payment receipts. Her hands began to shake as she understood what she was seeing. The Valari warships, she whispered. We built them? Every single one, Doyun said calmly. 60 years ago, a company called Beck Industries received a massive order, 3,000 warships. The buyer paid with rare minerals. The buyer used intermediaries and fake names. But the ships were built here. In our shipyards. By human hands. But how? Why did no one know? People knew. The company knew. The government knew. But it was just business. We build ships. We sell ships. We do not ask what our customers do with them. Doyun turned to face her. The Valari bought their fleet from us. They added more ships over the years. But the core of their armada came from human factories. They never asked who built their ships. They never thought to ask. Yuna stared at the blueprints on her screen. The designs matched the Valari warships exactly. The same engines. The same weapons. The same hull structure. Everything was the same. So we are going to war against our own ships, she said quietly. That is one way to look at it. Doyun walked back to his desk and sat down. But there is another way to look at it. A better way. What do you mean? Doyun leaned forward. The man who designed those ships. The founder of Baek Industries. His name is Baek Sunwoo. He is still alive. He is 92 years old and living in Busan. What about him? Sunwoo was a careful man. A very careful man. He always said that a good engineer plans for every possibility. Every possibility, Captain. Doyun's eyes were bright now, full of something that looked almost like excitement. I think it is time we paid Mr. Baek a visit. Yuna looked at the Admiral for a long moment. She did not understand everything yet. But she could see that Doyun was not worried about the coming war. He was not scared of 5,000 warships. He knew something. Something important. Should I prepare a shuttle, sir? Yes. And Captain? Doyun picked up the datapad and looked at the old blueprints one more time. Tell no one about these files. Not yet. Let the Valari come. Let them bring their mighty fleet. And then... He smiled again. A small and quiet smile. Then, we will show them who really built their empire. Outside the window, Earth continued to spin slowly in the darkness. Somewhere out there, 5,000 alien warships were preparing for war. Their commanders were confident. Their crews were eager. They believed victory was certain. They had no idea what was waiting for them. 60 years ago, Mars was a busy place. Factories covered its red surface. Shipyards floated in orbit around the planet. Millions of workers lived in domed cities, building the ships that humanity needed to explore the stars. In one of the smaller shipyards, a young man named Baek Sunwoo sat alone in his office. He was 32 years old, thin and tired, with dark circles under his eyes. His company, Baek Industries, was failing. He had spent 10 years building ships, but bigger companies always took the best contracts. He was running out of money. He was running out of hope. Then, the message arrived. It came through a trading company on a distant station. The sender wanted to remain anonymous. They wanted to buy warships. Not one or two. 3,000 warships. The largest order in human history. Sunwoo read the message 5 times. He thought it was a joke. Then the payment arrived. 50 tons of rare minerals. Enough to keep his company running for 100 years. The order was simple. Build warships, make them fast, make them strong, make them deadly. The buyer did not care about the price. They only cared about quality. Sunwoo accepted the contract. He hired thousands of workers. He bought new factories. He spent the next 15 years of his life building the greatest warships ever made. He called them the Hammer-class destroyers. Each ship was beautiful. Each ship was perfect. The engines were powerful enough to cross a star system in hours. The weapons could crack open a planet. The armor could survive any attack. Sun Wu put his soul into those ships. They were his children. They were his legacy. But Sun Wu was not a fool. He knew the buyer was not human. The minerals they paid with came from systems that no human had ever visited. The communication methods they used were strange and alien. Sun Wu could not prove it, but he knew the truth. He was building warships for aliens. Aliens who wanted to remain hidden. Aliens who might, one day, use these weapons against humanity. So Sun Wu made a decision. He would build the ships exactly as promised. He would make them the best warships in the galaxy. But he would also add something extra. Something hidden. Something that only he knew about. Deep inside every ship, buried in millions of lines of code, Sun Wu placed a secret. A back door. A kill switch. The ships would work perfectly for their new owners. They would fight. They would win. They would conquer. But if the right signal was ever sent, they would stop. Completely. Instantly. Forever. Sun Wu kept this secret for 15 years. He finished the order. He delivered the ships. He watched them fly away into deep space. Then, he closed his company and retired to Earth. He never told anyone what he had done. He kept a small data chip in his pocket, carrying the codes that could shut down 3,000 warships. He carried it with him every day for 60 years. Now, Sun Wu was 92 years old. He lived in a small house in Busan, by the sea. His hair was white. His hands were wrinkled. But his eyes were still sharp. His mind was still clear. He was working in his garden when the shuttle landed. 3 people stepped out. An old man in an admiral's uniform, a young woman with short hair, and a tall man in a dark suit. Sun Wu put down his gardening tools and watched them approach. He did not seem surprised to see them. "Mr. Baek, Sun Wu?" the admiral asked. "Yes. You must be Admiral Park Do-yoon. I have been expecting you." The old man smiled and wiped dirt from his hands. "The Valari declared war. Did they not?" Do-yoon's eyes widened slightly. "How did you know?" "I built their ships. I always knew this day might come." Sun Wu gestured toward his house. "Please, come inside. We have much to discuss." Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. Old books filled the shelves. Models of ships sat on tables. A young woman was making tea in the kitchen. She had long black hair and clever eyes. "This is my granddaughter," Sun Wu said. "Baek Hana. She is a systems engineer. She works for the Defense Force." Hana set down the teacups and looked at the visitors. "Grandfather, what is happening? Why are military officers at our house?" Sun Wu sat down slowly in his favorite chair. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, old data chip. He held it up so everyone could see. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Hana shook her head. "This chip contains the master codes for the Valari Warfleet. 3,000 of their ships. Anyway, the ships I built 60 years ago." Hana stared at her grandfather. "You built what?" Admiral Do-yoon stepped forward. "Mr. Baek, we need your help. The Valari are coming with 5,000 warships. We have less than 200. We cannot win a direct fight." "No," Sun Wu agreed. "You cannot, but you do not need to." He turned the data chip over in his wrinkled fingers. "I designed those ships to be the best in the galaxy. I spent 15 years making them perfect, but I also designed them to be loyal. Loyal to their true maker." "What do you mean?" Captain Yuna asked. "Every ship has a hidden system buried in its core. A system that responds only to my codes. One signal from this chip, and every ship I built will shut down. Weapons, engines, life support, everything. They will become floating metal boxes Dead in space. The room was silent. Hana sat down slowly, her face pale. "Grandfather," she whispered, "you planned this 60 years ago? I hoped I would never need to use it. I hoped the buyers would never threaten us. But hope is not a plan. A good engineer always prepares for the worst." Sun Wu looked at Admiral Do Yun with tired but determined eyes. "I am an old man. I do not have many years left. But I will not let my ships be used to destroy my people." He held out the data chip. Do Yun took it carefully, as if it were made of glass. 3,000 ships, the Admiral said quietly. "That leaves 2,000. The Valari bought more ships after mine. From other sources. Those ships I cannot control. But 3,000 is enough to change everything." Sun Wu leaned back in his chair. "The Valari think they are strong. They think their fleet makes them invincible. They are about to learn a very important lesson." "What lesson is that?" Hana asked. Her grandfather smiled. The same smile he had worn 60 years ago, when he first built his masterpieces. "Never go to war with weapons you do not truly own." Outside, the sun was setting over Busan. The sky turned orange and red. Somewhere far away, the Valari fleet was getting closer. 5,000 warships, carrying death and destruction. But in a small house by the sea, an old man had just given humanity a chance to survive. 3 weeks passed quickly. Across human space, people watched the news with fear in their hearts. The Valari were coming. The greatest warfleet in the galaxy was moving toward Earth. Military experts said humanity had no chance. Some people fled to distant colonies. Some people prayed. Some people simply waited for the end. But in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station, Admiral Park Do-yoon was calm. His officers worked around him, preparing for what everyone believed would be humanity's last battle. Only a few people knew the truth. Only a few people knew about the old man in Busan and his little data chip. On the final day, the Valari fleet arrived. They came out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 5,000 warships appeared in perfect formation, blocking out the stars. Each ship was massive and dark, covered in weapons and armor. Together, they stretched across millions of kilometers of space. It was the most terrifying sight any human had ever seen. High Commander Torek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory. He looked at the screens, showing the human system ahead. A small yellow sun, a few rocky planets, and one blue world called Earth. "So this is their home," he said with contempt. "This tiny planet. These weak creatures." He turned to his officers. "Open a channel. I want them to hear my voice before they die." The communication officer obeyed. Across the entire Sol system, Torek's message was heard. "People of Earth, I am High Commander Torek of the Valari Empire. You have trespassed on territory that does not belong to you. You have ignored our warnings. Now, you will pay the price." His golden eyes burned with hatred. "Surrender your colonies. Surrender your ships. Surrender your world. You have 1 hour. If you refuse, we will burn everything you have ever built. This is your only chance." The message ended. On Earth, billions of people watched in horror. Parents held their children. Lovers held each other. Everyone waited for the response. It came from Admiral Do-yoon himself. "High Commander Torek, this is Admiral Park Do-yoon of the Earth Defense Force. We have received your message. We will send a diplomatic ship to discuss terms." Torek laughed. "Discuss terms? There is nothing to discuss, human. Surrender or die. We ask only for a chance to speak. 1 ship, 1 ambassador. Surely the great Valari Empire is not afraid of 1 small vessel." The mockery in Do-yoon's voice made Torek angry. But he was also curious. What could 1 ship possibly do? Let them come. Let them beg. It would make his victory even sweeter. Very well, Torek growled. Send your ship. You have 30 minutes. Then, we attack. 20 minutes later, a single vessel emerged from behind Earth. It was small and white, with no weapons. Its name was painted on the side. Songbird. A diplomatic ship, a messenger of peace. The Songbird flew slowly toward the Valari fleet. On its bridge, Ambassador Yoon Jae-won sat quietly in his chair. He was 50 years old, with a kind face and gentle eyes. He had spent his whole life talking instead of fighting. He had ended wars with words alone, but he had never faced anything like this. Behind him stood Baik-hana. She was operating a special communication device, connected to systems that had been dormant for 60 years. In her hand was her grandfather's data chip. Ambassador, she said softly, we are in range. Jae-won nodded. He opened a channel to the Valari flagship. Hi, Commander Torek. I am Ambassador Yoon Jae-won. I come with a message from the people of Earth. On the Eternal Victory, Torek stared at the tiny ship on his screen. Speak, human. Make your final plea. I am not here to beg, Jae-won said calmly. I am here to offer you a chance. A chance to turn around. A chance to end this war before it truly begins. Torek laughed again. You offer us a chance? One ship against 5,000? You are either brave or insane. Perhaps both. Jae-won leaned forward slightly. Hi, Commander. I must ask you a question. A very important question. Do you know where your ships came from? Torek frowned. What kind of foolish question is that? Our ships are Valari ships, built by Valari engineers. They are the pride of our empire. Is that so? Jae-won's voice remained calm. Then perhaps you should check your records. Perhaps you should look at the original blueprints. Perhaps you should ask yourself why your ships have human design patterns in their structure. The bridge of the Eternal Victory fell silent. Officers looked at each other in confusion. Torek's face twisted with anger. You lie. Our ships are ours. They have always been ours. They were bought, Jae-won said simply. 60 years ago. From a company called Baek Industries. On Mars. The buyer used intermediaries and fake names. But the ships were built by human hands. 3,000 of your warships, High Commander. 3,000 ships that came from our factories. This is a trick. A pathetic trick to delay your death. Then perhaps this will convince you. Jae-won nodded to Hana. She pressed a button on her device. The signal went out. It traveled at the speed of light, spreading across the Valari fleet. It reached into ships that had not heard this frequency in 60 years. It found the hidden systems buried deep in their cores. It spoke a language that only one man had ever known, and across 3,000 warships, everything stopped. Lights flickered and died. Engines went silent. Weapons powered down. Navigation systems froze. Life support continued. But nothing else worked. 3,000 mighty warships became floating metal coffins, dead in the emptiness of space. On the Eternal Victory, chaos erupted. Officers screamed at their consoles. Technicians ran to check systems. Torek grabbed his command chair as his ship lost power. What is happening? He roared. What did you do? Jae-won's face appeared on the emergency screen, the only system still working. I told you, High Commander. Your ships came from us. And now I would like to introduce you to the man who built them. The screen flickered. A new face appeared. An old human face. Wrinkled and tired, but smiling. Hello, High Commander, Baek Sunwoo said from his home in Busan. I see you have been taking care of my ships. I must say, you kept them in good condition. I am impressed. Torek stared at the screen. His golden eyes were wide with shock. Who are you? My name is Baek Sunwoo. 60 years ago, I designed and built 3,000 warships. The finest warships in the galaxy, I sold them to a buyer who wanted to remain anonymous. That buyer was your empire." The old man paused. "I always wondered what they would be used for. I always feared they might be turned against my own people. So, I prepared. I hid something inside every ship I built. A little gift, from me to you." "This is impossible," Torek whispered. "You cannot control our ships." "I can," Sunwoo replied. "And I just did. Right now, 3,000 of your vessels are completely powerless. Your crews are safe, for now, but they cannot fight. They cannot run. They can only wait." The old man's smile faded. His eyes became hard and cold. "You declared war on humanity, High Commander. You came here to destroy us. But you made one terrible mistake. You went to war with weapons that were never truly yours." Sunwoo held up the data chip for Torek to see. "This little piece of plastic contains your fate. One more signal, and those ships will never work again. One more signal, and your empire loses 60% of its military power." On the Songbird, Jaewon spoke again. "We are giving you a choice, High Commander. Leave now. Take your remaining ships and go home. End this war before anyone dies. Or stay, and watch everything you have fall apart." Torek stood frozen on his dark bridge. Around him, his officers waited in silence. 2,000 of his ships still worked, but 3,000 were gone. His mighty fleet had been cut in half by an old man and a data chip. For the first time in 200 years, High Commander Torek knew the taste of fear. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Within hours, every civilization in the sector knew what had happened. The mighty Valari Empire had attacked humanity, and humanity had stopped them with nothing more than a single signal. On the Valari homeworld, the council met in emergency session. High Commander Torek knelt before them in chains. His face burned with shame. He had returned home with only 2,000 ships. The rest floated uselessly at the edge of human space, their crews evacuated but their systems forever dead. "How did this happen?" the eldest council member demanded. "How did we not know? Our ships came from humans. The purchase was made in secret," a historian explained, his voice shaking. 300 years ago, our ancestors bought the ships through intermediaries. They used false names and hidden accounts. They did not want anyone to know where our power came from. Over time, the truth was forgotten. We believed we had built them ourselves, and now we have lost everything because of that lie. The council chamber fell silent. Generations of pride and arrogance had led them to this moment. They had looked down on humans as weak and inferior. They had never imagined that humans had given them their strength in the first place. Far away, in other star systems, other civilizations were asking similar questions. The Korathi Collective examined their mining ships and found human serial numbers hidden in the hulls. The Thessan Republic checked their medical frigates and discovered they had come from factories on Earth's moon. Even the Norks Confederacy, the Valari's greatest rival, learned that their flagship had been built in a Martian orbital dock. The truth was stunning. Humanity had been the galaxy's shipbuilders for over 200 years. More than half of all advanced vessels in the sector had human origins. They had sold to everyone, without politics or judgment. They had never advertised their work. They had simply built ships and sold them to whoever wanted to buy. And now everyone realized what that meant. On Earth, the Global Defense Council met to decide what to do next. The chamber was filled with military officers, politicians, and advisors. Admiral Doyun sat at one end of the long table. Baek Sunwoo sat beside him, looking small and tired but alert. General Im Unji spoke first. She was a tall woman, with a strong voice and hard eyes. "We should finish what we started. We have the codes to permanently destroy the disabled ships. We should use them. Without those vessels, the Valari Empire will collapse. They will never threaten us again." "And what message does that send?" asked Ambassador J1. That humanity destroys anyone who challenges us? That we cannot be trusted? 1. We can be trusted, the general replied. Trusted to defend ourselves. At what cost? J1 shook his head. If we destroy those ships, every civilization in the galaxy will fear us. They will see us as conquerors, not builders. They will form alliances against us. We will trade one enemy for 100. The debate continued for hours. Some wanted strength. Some wanted mercy. Some wanted revenge. The room was divided. Finally, a young woman stood up. It was Baek Hana. She had been invited as a technical advisor, but she had remained silent until now. May I speak? Admiral Doyun nodded. Go ahead. Hana walked to the center of the room. She looked at the generals and politicians, at her grandfather, at the leaders who would decide humanity's future. I spent the last 3 weeks studying my grandfather's designs. I read his notes from 60 years ago, and I found something interesting. She pulled up a display showing the internal systems of the Velari ships. The kill switch was not the only thing he hid in those ships. He also included a reset function, a way to restore full power to every vessel. The room erupted in noise. General Im stood up angrily. Why would we restore their ships? They tried to kill us. Because my grandfather did not build those ships for war, Hana said calmly. He built them to protect, to defend. He hoped they would never be used against innocent people, and he hoped that one day the people who bought them would understand something important. Understand what? Doyun asked. Hana looked at her grandfather. The old man smiled and nodded slightly. That true power does not come from weapons, she said. It comes from the ability to create, to build, to make things that last. She turned back to the council. We could destroy those ships. We could cripple the Velari forever. But that would make us destroyers. That is not who we are. We are builders. We have always been builders. She paused, letting her words sink in. I propose a different path. We give the ships back, fully restored, no hidden codes, no secret controls. We let the Velari have their fleet again. But we make sure the entire galaxy knows what happened here. We show everyone that humanity could have destroyed them but chose not to. We show them that we are not their enemy. We are their partners, their suppliers, their friends. The room was quiet. General Im sat back down, her face thoughtful. Ambassador Jaewon nodded slowly. Sun Wu spoke for the first time. His voice was soft, but clear. When I was young, I wanted to build the greatest ships in the galaxy. I did that. But I also wanted to build something else. Something bigger. I wanted to build trust. Trust between species. Trust between civilizations. He looked around the room with tired eyes. This is our chance. We can show the galaxy that humans are not conquerors. We are creators. We build bridges, not walls. We make friends, not enemies. Admiral Doyun listened carefully. He thought about his career. He thought about his family. He thought about the future of his species. If we do this, he said slowly, we need to make sure it works. We need a plan, a way to turn this moment into something lasting. Jaewon leaned forward. I have an idea. We propose a galactic treaty. Full transparency in all warship manufacturing. Every civilization must declare where their ships come from. No more secrets. No more hidden purchases. We call it the Sunwoo Accords. And humanity leads by example, Hana added. We open our shipyards to inspection. We share our designs. We show that we have nothing to hide. The council voted. It was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would take the path of peace. They would restore the Velari ships. They would share the truth with the galaxy. They would build a new future based on trust instead of fear. 3 days later, Ambassador Jaewon stood before representatives from a dozen species. The meeting was held on a neutral station, far from any homeworld. The Valari were there, their faces filled with shame and confusion. Other species watched with curious eyes. Jaewon spoke simply and clearly. We could have destroyed you. We had the power. We had the right. You attacked us without warning. You threatened to burn our world. He paused. But we chose a different way. Today, we are restoring full control of your ships. No conditions. No demands. We only ask that you remember what happened here. Remember that humanity showed mercy when we could have shown strength. And remember that we would rather have friends than enemies. He pressed a button. Across space, the signal went out. 3,000 Valari ships came back to life. Lights returned. Engines hummed. Systems activated. The Valari representative stood slowly. He was a young officer, sent because the high command was too ashamed to come themselves. Why? He asked quietly. Why would you help us after what we did? Jaewon smiled. Because war is easy. Anyone can destroy. But building something that lasts, making peace that endures, that is hard. That is what we do. That is who we are. Well, thanks for watching. Isn't this something the channel tent? Also, we're subscribed to Friends of Corden. The young officer looked at Jaewon for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. We will not forget this. I swear it on my honor. Outside the station windows, stars filled the darkness. Somewhere out there, the restored Valari fleet was returning home. Somewhere out there, a new future was beginning. And across the galaxy, species who had feared humanity began to see them in a different light. Not as threats, not as enemies. As builders of worlds. 1 year passed. The galaxy had changed in ways no one expected. The Valari Empire still existed. But it was different now. The proud warriors who once looked down on other species had learned a painful lesson. They had lost their arrogance along with their pride. Many of them felt shame when they remembered how they had threatened to destroy humanity. Many of them wondered how they had been so blind. High Commander Torek was no longer a military leader. The council had stripped him of his rank and his honors. He had expected to be executed for his failure. Instead, they gave him a strange punishment. They sent him to Earth as a cultural ambassador. At first, Torek hated every moment. He hated the blue sky and the green trees. He hated the noise of human cities and the smell of human food. He hated being surrounded by the small, soft creatures he had once wanted to destroy. But slowly, things changed. He met human families who invited him to dinner. He met children who asked him about his homeworld with curious eyes. He met engineers who showed him their work with pride and passion. He began to understand that these people were not weak. They were simply different, strong in ways he had never considered. One day, Torek visited Baek Sunwoo in Busan. The old man was working in his garden, as always. His granddaughter Hana was with him, helping him plant flowers. Why did you let us live? Torek asked. He had wanted to ask this question for months. You could have destroyed our fleet completely. You could have left us defenseless. Why did you show mercy? Sunwoo stopped working and looked up at the tall alien. His old eyes were calm and peaceful. When I was young, I learned something important. Revenge feels good for a moment. But building something, creating something, that lasts forever. He gestured around him at his garden, at his house, at the world beyond. I have built ships. I have built companies. I have built a family. Those things matter to me. Destroying things does not. But we were your enemies. You were our customers, Sunwoo replied with a small smile. You paid good money for those ships. And I always take care of my customers. Even the difficult ones. Work? Torek did not know how to respond to that. He stood in silence for a long moment, watching the old human work in his garden. "You are a strange species," he finally said. "Yes," Sunwoo agreed. "We are." 3 months later, Sunwoo passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 93 years old. He had lived a full life. He had built great things. He had saved his world without firing a single shot. His funeral was held in Busan, by the sea he loved. Thousands of people came to pay their respects. Scientists and engineers, politicians and military officers, common workers, and wealthy businessmen. They all came to honor the man who had changed the galaxy, but the most surprising guests were the aliens. Representatives came from 30 different species. The Valari sent a full delegation. The Korathi and Thessan and Norks all sent their leaders. Even species that had never spoken to each other before came together for this moment. They stood side by side with humans, watching as Sunwoo's family said their goodbyes. They listened as Hana spoke about her grandfather's life. They heard stories about a young engineer who had dreamed of building the greatest ships in the galaxy and had achieved so much more. When the ceremony ended, Ambassador Jaewon approached the alien delegates. "Thank you for coming," he said. "It would have meant a lot to Mr. Bake." The Valari representative, the same young officer from a year ago, bowed his head.
"The greatest victory is the one that needs no battle. Remember that." Captain Yuna, his former second-in-command, took his place. She became the first female fleet admiral in human history. She built the defense force into something stronger and smarter, but she also remembered the lesson of the Valari War. Strength was important, but wisdom was more important. Ambassador Jaewon finished writing the Sunwoo Accords. The treaty required complete transparency in all warship manufacturing. No more secret purchases. No more hidden buyers. Every civilization had to declare where their ships came from. It took years of negotiation, but eventually, most of the galaxy signed. The treaty changed everything. Wars became less common. Conflicts were settled through diplomacy instead of violence. Species that had been enemies for centuries began to trade and cooperate. The galaxy was still not perfect, but it was getting better. And through it all, humanity kept building. They built ships and stations. They built hospitals and schools. They built roads between the stars and bridges between species. They did not conquer. They did not destroy. They simply created, day after day, year after year. Other species watched them with wonder. How could these small, soft creatures accomplish so much? How could they change the galaxy without ever firing a weapon? The answer was simple. Humanity understood something that many species forgot. True power does not come from the ability to destroy. True power comes from the ability to create, to make something from nothing, to build a future that others can share. 10 years after the Valari War, a young alien student visited Earth for the first time. She was from a species that lived on the other side of the galaxy. Her people had only recently made contact with humanity. She knew nothing about the war or the ships or the old engineer who had changed everything. She landed in Busan, drawn by stories of the famous shipyards nearby. She walked through the city, amazed by everything she saw. The buildings, the people, the energy and life that filled every street. She found herself at a small park by the sea. In the center of the park stood a statue, an old human man, sitting in a chair, looking out at the water. A plaque at the base said his name, Baek Sun-woo. A local human woman noticed her looking at the statue. She smiled and walked over. "Do you know who that is?" the woman asked. "No," the student admitted. "I just arrived here. I do not know much about your world." The woman sat down on a bench and gestured for the student to join her. "Let me tell you a story," she said. "It is about an old man who built ships. Ships that were sold to aliens who later tried to destroy us. But instead of using those ships for revenge, he used them to save us. And then he gave them back." The student listened with wide eyes. "He gave them back? After they attacked you?" "Yes." Because he understood something important. He understood that destruction is easy. Anyone can break things. But building, creating, making peace where there was war, that is hard. That is what matters. That is what lasts. The student looked at the statue for a long time. The old man's face was peaceful, kind. He looked like someone who had seen many things and learned many lessons. "Your species is very strange," she said finally. The woman laughed. "Yes, we have been told that before." The student smiled. She stayed in Busan for 3 weeks, learning about humanity, learning about their history, learning about an old engineer and his impossible dream. When she returned home, she told everyone what she had seen. She told them about the builders of ships, the makers of peace, the strange, soft creatures who had changed the galaxy without ever wanting to rule it. And across the stars, in shipyards and factories and homes, humanity continued to do what not empires, not weapons of conquest, not monuments to their own glory. They built the future. One ship at a time, one world at a time, one friendship at a time. Because in the end, that was who they were. Builders of worlds, makers of dreams, human.